So guys, I want to apologize first for my dusty computer, but I do want to talk about the Japanese anime series Noir. So this is really, part one, part two, part three of the anime. So part one is, from episode one all the way until episode 10. And what this does is that it really covers, the characters. It covers Marielle and Kirika, and then you kind of have some of the best episodes of the series. Episode 1, Episode 2, Episode 3, Episode 4. Don't watch Episode 5 unless you want to fall asleep. And Episode 6. Those are kind of the best ones. Episode 7 is all right. Episode 8 and 9 are considered one of the worst of the series. And then it ends at episode 10 where you run into Chloe, who is, one of the main characters of the whole series. So that is part one of the anime series. And to me, this is the strongest part because you have a lot of really deep and philosophical episodes. You also are introduced to these characters and importantly, their psychology and how they think. And what I also will say is that I've used this term before. There's something called a main character, which means that once a character's removed from a show or a series, you can't make the show without them. But there's also something called a main character, where it's almost like they're more important to the show than the main characters. For example, in Naruto, the main character is Naruto, but definitely the Leaf Village is also the main character because if you don't have the Leaf Village, you don't have the Naruto show. In the anime Noir, you just have, Marielle and Kirika as the main characters, and, Chloe and Altena are like the secondary main characters. So in the first part, you kind of get a huge highlight of, also who Marielle and Kirika are. And you also get a huge sense of, their psychology, their backstory, how they relate, what's the universe of Noir like for them. And I would also say that you have some of the best fight scenes in the entire anime. You have, the third episode, which I feel is the best fight scene, with a lot of outfoxing. Episode 4 is good outfoxing. Episode 6 and also in episode 4, you kind of see how some of their missions are really just, and maybe just taking out one guy who's an easy target, really. Unfortunately, in some of the later episodes in part 2, you kind of run into, plot armor or the invincible main character. And I do want to talk about the second part of Noir, really. So the second part of Noir starts with episode 10 and it ends with episode 16. So this is kind of like the worst of these episodes. And some of them are very, very powerful as well, really. So, episode 10, we get the introduction of Chloe. You have a controversial fight scene because you have something that gets into a little bit of, lacks realism. And then you also get into the cold-blooded killer, and there is another, shootout scene where it's almost like you see bullets being shot at these main characters, and then you're kind of like, how is that possible that they're not being hurt, really? You go from Noir with characters that are outfoxing, and they kind of have a lot of stealth and really good abilities, abilities that a human being can learn. Outfoxing, stealth, and all that stuff to just, they just don't manage to take any bullets and any damage, really. I do feel that, when you watch some of these episodes, some of them have good writing and some of them have, characters that I feel could be developed a lot more. I've kind of talked about, in episode 12, how Ryman and the other person who's in charge of the narcotics, they could have, Zellner, they could have had multiple episodes. I would rather prefer them versus the cold-blooded killer. The other part of it is that you kind of see Chloe come in this, and Chloe has the ability to use daggers, and once again, it's kind of like, as we talked about, she's fighting people with a bunch of guns, really. How does somebody with, throwing knives beat a person with a bunch of guns? It lacks realism. And also, too, that, the cold-blooded killer They kind of talk about her backstory, but it's really trying to set up that it's really about these three main characters going through a trial together. But the Cold Blood Killer, she's not really that good of a villain, really, and there's not really that good of a backstory behind her. She's interesting, but there's not that good of a backstory. So these are kind of like the weakest part, I kind of feel. And they did say that when they produced the anime Noir, what happened was that they were kind of rushed a little bit. I think like the first like 8 or 9 episodes, they had a lot of time to produce episodes to write the script. Here they were a little like rushed, and the last part is like the second strongest to me. And this is like as I said, the Noir prophecy. This is from episode 17 all the way to episode 26. The longest arc, and possibly I think even I would say as a series goes, you can argue that this is the best one because it does have a bit of an overlapping story. From Marielle and Kirika's backstory all the way to the ending. I do think that one bad thing about the show is that they don't tell you anything about Chloe's backstory, except that she was inspired by Kirika. They kind of tell you a little bit of Altana's backstory, but it would have been interesting they kind of did something with Chloe. And I really think that, this is also very strong because all these episodes have a storyline. So it's not like what you see in a lot of Japanese anime in the first part where it's like, there's a bit of an interconnecting story, but it seems like these are all one-off, like episode 2, episode 3, episode 4, episode 6, episode 7, episode 8, episode 9. They get to know a little bit more about the Soldats, but not as much really. And the characters really don't, that you see in these episodes, or the villains, they really don't build upon each other. When you have these episodes, you kind of see that the main villain is really the Soldats, including Altana. So obviously this is a criminal syndicate. So you kind of see different people of the criminal syndicate. So there is a lot of just, correlation and all this stuff. So that's important. And as I see, like when I watch these fight scenes and I remember these, unfortunately, it does also go into the realm of cartoonish. You see in one episode, and I'll spoil it, unfortunately, that Kirika gets shot in the head, and she manages to survive either with a real bullet or a blank, and she manages to survive. So that's a little like supernatural. You also kind of see in episode 26, I'll spoil this, is that Altana, there's a scene where she doesn't get hit by bullets when Kirika and Marielle are firing at her. So you're telling me that these markswomen, through 25 episodes of just having like this, ability to kill people, can't fire bullets at Altana? That does not make any sense. There's a scene in the last episode where a bunch of people they may be falling to their death, really, and just how it's done physically is not possible. The other thing that I will say is that, like I've said before, that I think that when you look at some of the fight scenes, some of them are realistic, and some of them are not that realistic. And that's kind of the end of it. I think that, like I said, I don't like watching episode 26 because it's the end of the series. You kind of make closure with the characters, but it's definitely a tearjerker and painful because you really see a huge emotional journey. I would say that, honestly, the episode 26 alone is probably the most emotional episode of the whole entire series. And I also will say, I would say that 21, 22, 26, and 25 are like the most best emotional episodes of the entire series. They all go together. But ultimately, I think when you look at the series and you kind of talk about, complex morality and very powerful emotions, I would say the first part is good. You have 4 back-to-back episodes, and then you have like this one. So I would say the first part 1 is the best one. Part 2 is the second best. Part 1 is the best one. Episode 1 to episode 10. And part 1 is the best one. Episode 1 to episode 9. And then part 2 is from episode 10 all the way to episode 16. That's the weakest arc. And then the second strongest arc is from 17 all the way to 26. So I think this kind of really categorizes Noir, and it also kind of gives you guys a little bit of a dissection of what are the best episodes. So when I review the anime series, what I'm going to do is I'm going to review all the episodes, but I'm going to save 17 to 26 to the very, very end. And I'm going to try to do like one episode a week. And then the other part of it that I will say is that I know I've missed a couple of weeks because, like I've said, I have a relative that's taking off from work. I can't get shit done. I've also been overcoming, some health issues. But I do want to do this series a great justice, really. So I'm going to post some episodes today and tomorrow while I'm in my hotel room down in Florida, because I need to save some money, really. So I'm going to, try to get maybe 4 done. But if I get 3 done, I've accomplished my goal, really. So I missed 3 weeks. If I give you guys 3 episodes, I'll be proud of it. So that's all I got to say. But I think that this is a good dissection of the series. Just remember, as I said, or to reiterate, episode 1 to episode 9 is part 1. This is the best. Episode 10 all the way to episode 16 is part 2, and that's the weakest arc. Episode 17 all the way to episode 26 is the best, is the second best. And then one thing I gotta tell you guys is, can you guys guess why the series is 26 episodes? All right, this is a theory, but what happens in Japan is that they every other weekend they have off from school, so they go to school 26 weeks of the year, and that just means what they'll probably do with a lot of anime series is make them 26 episodes. You watch this, then there's a rerun. You watch this, and there's a rerun. You watch this, and there's a rerun. You watch this, and there's a rerun. So that's kind of why they do like the 26 episode format in a lot of Japanese animes. But also too that 26 episodes is like half a year, really. So if you have a series like Noir, which was very, very controversial at its time, sometimes what would happen is that they'll stop it at 12 episodes, and that's like a fourth of a year, 3 months, and or they'll stop it at 26 episodes, which is like a half a year, and that's just kind of a way for them to kind of be limited. It's just so they're not like overdoing this. And I've kind of explained this before, that in Japanese culture, excuse me, that blood in the depiction of violence is very controversial. That's why in a lot of these episodes when characters get shot, they don't show the blood, because at that time they would have gotten like banned from television or like an X rating type of thing, really. But there are episodes like episode 25 with a bunch of nudity in it. So 24 and 25 with nudity in it. So like in Japanese culture, they're not that hard on nudity. So that's kind of just how it is, really. So definitely it was a controversial series. Like to say, with a lot of Japanese anime, it costs like $100,000 an episode. So you can imagine that this was like maybe like a $1 million to $3 million top investment. So they honestly just had to keep the cost, they've had to kind of keep the cost, kind of low a bit, not upset the wrong people, just tell a good story with in a 26 episode format. I can't imagine Noir being 12 episodes and doing a good job with it. So it did work out. I think 26 episodes is good enough. It doesn't feel too little. It doesn't feel too long. It's not Naruto where they extended it way more longer than it should be. And also as well, really, that even though like the anime lacks a lot of realism in some areas, I can really appreciate the fact that it's still a very strong story. Like the storytelling is very, very strong. When you kind of get into the action of it, some of it has it's very, very 50-50. It has its really big highs and its really big lows, really. So, my goal is really to finish this, and maybe by like April I'll finish this, but I'm going to work like at least one episode a week. But if I can give you guys 4 episodes this weekend, I would be a very, very happy motherfucker. So that's all I got to say about this. Very great series. I wanted to dissect this for you guys, and also too, like if you want to sit down and watch all my reviews, I'm going to do all the episodes, and I like how I'm doing it because, it's a series that needs to be talked about. It's lost to time because it came out in 2001. It's about to have its 24th anniversary. In another year, it'll be 25 years old, a quarter of a century, which is amazing. And then the other part of it that I would have to tell you is that, it's also an anime that did a lot because you have 2 strong female characters. They're not sexualized. You're inspired by a lot of European noir films and mystery storytelling. Like, this is a very, cutting edge, very avant-garde anime. And it's definitely very unfortunate it's lost of time. It's very, very underrated. It kind of goes, to me, as probably maybe in the top 50, I would say, or even top 20 best animes of the 2000s. And I think it's definitely one of the most important animes in history for, just its strong portrayal of women in a very positive way. That a lot of women were allowed to work on this project and interject their ideas, so it wasn't like a man's misogynistic approach. And then also too, the way that they kind of give you these characters. These are characters well written, and the psychological depth of these characters are done very well. And ultimately, it's very, very great writing. Like I said, if Tarantino ever wanted to turn noir into into a television series, he would honestly be winning Emmys, but nonstop, really. I've actually even thought about turning noir into a musical, and that would be really, really good. Or even if Tarantino took a couple of these episodes and he made like a 2-hour, 3-hour movie, it would honestly could be Best Picture worthy because just of, what you could present to the table with this, because of even like the source material, there's such a very enriching level of character depth and emotions and all that stuff, really, so I can talk all day about noir, but I'll save that for my review video. So that's all I got to say about dissecting, the series and telling you what is part 1, part 2, and part 3 of this.